Sometimes, a man just needs to learn how to throw a punch.
And we continue on. So I am by myself now. I am going down the road from Marseille to Paris, but I'm in phase C. I can see I'm on the outskirts of the city, and I'm going to flip another card in phase C. And I got the force card. Now the force card is going to tell me that until the deck reshuffles, I'm ignoring knights and treating them as 10s.
We forded the river knowing our destination would be slightly to the west, on the left bank. King Philip II in the 1200s built a massive fortress of the Louvre, designed to protect the right bank. Paris's population had steadily climbed to over 200,000, which made it the most populous city in Europe. The city had all too numerous narrow streets, meaning we would not be found. There were people living everywhere, on the streets and in the ditches. Most families lived in squalor. We could blend in among the vox populi. Everyone knew to mind their own business. A few pennies from my baronial purse to a few urchins gave me a rundown of the whereabouts of all the constables on this far side of the river. Paris, since the Roman age, is an ever-growing hub of trade, though it was not always the French capital. The Roman army of Titus defeated the Parisii and established a Gallo-Roman garrison as a town. The remains of the original stockades were now luxury apartments of an aristocratic elite that included Flambeau, the Lord High Mayor. During the Middle Ages, Paris mayors built important religious and commercial centers, praised by the church and the nobles. Gothic architecture was everywhere. There were many foreigners. The University of Paris on the left bank, organized in the mid-13th century, was one of the first in Europe. Alas, the city suffered greatly from the bubonic plague, but that as well was 2 centuries ago. Now the majority of deaths were caused by poor sanitation and outright starvation. I wanted to be out of there as quickly as possible.
Wow, I'm ignoring knaves, I'm ignoring knights, now did the deck actually reshuffle between the last time I did this episode and this episode? Maybe I'm not ignoring knaves, but I'm going to carry it over just because I'm level 0 and also it's part of the nice flair that's happening. I'm ignoring personal events, I'm ignoring knights, and I'm also now ignoring and treating all those as 10s. All right, here we go. Yeah, I could have done that. I could have maybe grabbed something in the back. No, but I'm not ignoring kings. I'm ignoring a personal event. I could have picked a card that would have generated a personal event. That might have been another way of getting out of the phase, but I'm just speculating here because I know the rules. You guys, if you haven't played this very much, you're going to be stumbling along. You're going to be thinking, oh gosh, how am I ever going to get through this? Just have fun. There's so much to explore within the game package itself. Just have fun. Have fun with it. Be pirates. Be explorers. Investigate the new world. Go wherever you want. On with the show. So, I am now ignoring knights and treating them as 10s. A 5. Now that 5 is going to tell me that once again I am not in phase. I'm in phase C. I would need a 7, 8, 9. It's not a king, queen, knight, knave, or 10. A previous card is a king, queen, knight, knave, or 10. No, the previous card was... What was the previous card? The previous card was a 10. It is. So I have a personal event. But we're ignoring personal events from the major tarot and we're treating them as 10s. So that brings us up to the climax.
I took a head count, nearly 20. So many scoundrels, so many at home. I knew I had some leadership potential, but could also see that each of the faces had an ulterior motive. The last thing I wanted was for 20 unscrupulous bastards like me to enter a museum and loot the place. This task required finesse, a bit of prudence. I had other instructions I would give my budding company of Les Miserables. If anyone asks, you are students from Bavaria, unable to speak many words. You're hungry and trying to fish. Fishing was never seen as restricted. You could lose your life for shooting a deer, but collect all the trout you desire. It was considered peasant fare. I emptied the rest of the windfall I had received from EI by way of the Baron Dacombe. My purse would be fully spent. I paid each of my fellow scoundrels a gratuity based solely on his head size. 'Twas as good a benchmark as any other. All did seem pleased. Now go, do as I instruct. I wanted something staged ahead of time. My men knew to make as much ballyhoo along the rivers as they could, then move elsewhere. It was too wet to start a real blaze, but make some smoke. Truthfully, I had no idea what I was doing.
Now, I would normally, as a referee, either have something made for my climax, or I would have some sort of situation where I would generate something with automation, either in an Excel or, VB. You probably won't have either of those. If you do, God bless you. But I use automation a lot when I game, and it just saves me time. But you can craft out an adventure, and I'm going to use this encounter flow sheet and just bring something in to play here. And let's see if I can add a desktop and grab something that's helpful. Climax site, and I need a palace. And an Asian palace. I don't want an Asian palace. An abbey, a fortress, a port, and a city, a colony, a capital fortress. Capital fortress could be nice for that situation. How about if I use a capital fortress? And I got a capital fortress here. So this is the Summer Palace. It looks in terrible shape. That's probably why the king is investigating cleaning it up. Move that just a little bit over. Make it a little smaller. That ought to do it. And the king is probably cleaning up this palace. And I have here A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and X. Now, my goal in the climax will be from moving from outside ring of A, B, C, D, E, F, and G into the inner ring of 1, 2, 3, 4 to finally get to the X, which will be my objective, where I can get the Fabergé egg. Is that a car in there in the background? No, obviously that's a coach in the background there. If you're don't go in too closely with it. And how would I normally do this? Well, I would take some time as a referee, and I would detail what happens at A. Maybe that's climb a wall, or B, I'm out here at a gardener's shed, or a queen's private villa, and C, moving through a dense forest, and there could be dogs, or it could be very rural. It could be wolves there. At E, I could be maybe climbing up this cliff next to the riverbank here. At F, I could deal with the guys that are cleaning the cannons, etc. around the table. Now, I can make this all up on the fly, or I can just use randomization. I think I'm going to use some randomization here. So give me just a moment to generate something. I've got my mission, my climax generated here, and I'm going to be playing Henri, and I need to choose an entry point. Now, I can enter through B. Now, B actually is a caretaker's hut, and it has a tunnel.
The caretaker feigned he was hard of hearing. I believed it was a ruse. But for all I knew, he was retired from the cannonry that surrounded the fortress. I would speak to you, my fellow. Speak of the king's safety. I buttoned and unbuttoned part of my orange outer coat, drawing his attention to my obvious rank. I hear from experiences that these castles were once riddled with old tunnels, were they not? He agreed, stating that yes, the very house we were in was the transit point to exit from the inner keep during a siege. I was in luck. However, he quickly added that King Philip got tired of Queen Anne's philandering. The monarch had the tunnel turned into a maze of shifting passageways. Then his son, King Louis, later decided that after the tunnels flooded in the storms of 1209, that he would let his pet crocodiles live down there. Those were a gift from the Pharaoh of Egypt. So, alligators in a maze, you say? Well, then the crocs were eaten by a breed of Norwegian wharf rat, some the size of Auric. The extinct buffalo? I had not seen an Auric, but I could not refute what he was suggesting. But what you're saying, though, is with a pontoon bateau, conceivably someone could row through to the palace. Yes, he proffered. I nodded, and he seemed unable to take the hint. I finally had to just blurt out my need. Do you have a canoe? I do. It's tied by the river. We got it and started to carry it inside. He stopped. Well, man, where's the tunnel? I wish to see to the safety of the king. Oh, that tunnel was collapsed. If you go outside, you will see the remains of a ditch where it once threaded below. But you said there was a tunnel. Yes, in ancient times. Philip and Louis have been dead for several centuries. Both are buried in the castle courtyard of the Louvre. Thanks for nothing. My pleasure, he replied. I cannot tell if he was an idiot or the finest man at mockery I had met.
I could take a direct goal and I can enter straight through C, which is sort of a back garden courtyard, which I can use the foliage here and get all the way up into the inner sanctum, these fortress walls and townhouses that are built within the castle.
So far, I had had good luck. There were many people working on the renovations. The king was expected in the coming weeks, and no one was sure which day. Everyone worked at a frenzied pace. I found that anyone approaching from the front, that all I needed to do was point at them and they would quickly move in the opposite direction. Anyone taking me by surprise or overtaking me from behind, I would just start counting and suggesting aloud that many of these trees would need to be felled. That would get them to move quickly on their way, without any questions. Being a spy, a former informer of the dockmaster of Marseille, reporting on all the cargoes of all the ships to prevent smugglers, I was still observant and slippery. There was a trellis, a vine entanglement that was not yet pruned. It seemed to reach into the upper story windows. It would be difficult outside except at night to get through that way, but it could make an excellent egress, provided I could find entry elsewhere. Most people would take no notice of a man escaping a liaison. We are, after all, French.
And I'm going to decide to I'm a spy, so it's easier probably for me to sneak straight in. And as I move through the woods here, and I'm dressed in my horse guard uniform, I encounter some guards, but they're stalwart there. And I'm going to need to fight if I'm going to decide to get past here. Now, I'm going to use a modified table in order to get past these guards. Let me see what I can use here. I will use a command action card, and until I get an aid result. So let me get the command action card and an aid result. And I'm going to enter into the castle, and I'm going to go to the table of... Now these are labeled as ship encounters, but I can generically change them on the fly to represent something that's a little bit more action-oriented for the castle. If I picture the castle as like a fixed body in a area that's meaningless to me, the same way you would have a ship on the water, I can simulate with the boarding action rules of me boarding, in essence, the castle. Now, if you can't wrap your head around that, brash. The table always has some, the book always has some easier tables to use. I just like to see the whole gambit of events that can happen here. Or if I had a week between events and I knew I was going to run this, I would even draw my own Q&D for it, of how you can get past this this courtyard with the foliage here and sneak in.
I expect a battle. I judge these folks to be stalwart men, people who owe the king fealty. I hate nobles who have nothing better to do than to kill commoners as entertainment to break up their daily grind.
But again, it's the direct action in. And I'm looking for boarding action command to get an aid result. So I go into the boarding actions, and I look at the tables, and I see that an aid result I can get it on cross ships with only a few actions, and I can get it on cross deck with a lot more. So I'm going to use the cross deck command, and I'm going to flip a card there, and I'm going to interpret what's happening. Here goes my card of cross deck command, and it's a queen. Hopefully that queen will help me out here. Crossed deck, it's a traverse deck. Traverse deck, it's not a sail. Traverse deck queen. So I'm going to dupe opponent into making an ill-planned counterattack on me. I'm going to make it seem like we're more at D. There's a large force of men that are coming through the woods at D, as if the whole palace might be threatened. So I'm going to get them to respond to that. Success, and I'm going to gain a +1 modifier for the rest of this climax. That's a very important die roll. If this character lacks a skilled gunner, and I do, I can't sneak around and either sabotage some of these guns to the side or use the guns as another form of distraction of the noise they make. And if the player lacks a skilled gunner, difficulty increases by 4. However, the advantage is cunning, which I am, and that's really nice. By having the advantage of cunning, I'm going to roll 3 dice, looking for an 8. Now, this will not give me the aid I need. This won't be the only action I'll need to get to the fortress. However, it will be a good start, and it will give me +1 on my future dice rolls here. So let me roll my dice. I'm looking for an 8 on 3 dice, and I've rolled easily my 8. So I now have I've duped my opponents in order to make that ill-planned action of moving most of their men to defend this coastline here.
I pointed out to any guard that would listen that the smoke wafting over the trees could be the aftermath of cannon fire. Not my best attempt at lying, but I also did not want to seem too competent. The higher the rank, the more political the appointment. I truly did not know enough of my uniform to know where I stood, so I erred on the side of a pampered dolt. "Where is the sound?" many would ask. I would pretend to be flustered. "Sound plays tricks on you over the water." I wish I had more skills. It was the second time this journey that being a gunner would have provided some useful help. I knew I did not know what I was talking about, and eventually one group decided to confront me in my lies.
Still flipping cards, looking for an aid, and a 4 on the traverse command. And I'm going to confuse the opponent commander into issuing confusing orders. I'm going to taunt him into giving flustered or contrary orders. And this success will result in the aid result. So that would get me past this encounter. If the player character has the skill literacy, difficulty reduces by 3. I am, once again, a literate man. So now my skills, which seemed to have deserted me earlier, are starting to help me out a bit more.
The sergeant of the guards was an impatient man. He didn't like being summoned. He was extremely fit, and his hands were as calloused as anyone who had handled sandpaper for enjoyment. He had other matters, constant matters he needed to attend to. I did not appear to be armed. Was he searched? The man holding me nodded. "And you found?" Nothing, came the sheepish reply. I had stashed my weapons elsewhere, knowing I first needed to reconnoiter. As they allowed me to stand, I pulled rank. I told them that I was testing the vigilance. "Well done." Of course, smoke means little. Someone cooking, I cajoled, asked each man his name and wrote it down. Most of them had never seen their name written on paper. "Do me a favor and reinforce the patrols. Make sure no dirty peasant is cutting firewood. These trees, they need to be lush in the spring, not just burnt trunks." One of the men added that he knew the locals would hollow out trunks and make canoes. Okay, I'd go with that. "Yes, very true. Let's make sure no fisherman is carving bateaux." As long as the sergeant was not involved, he was okay with his men, mostly idle, being ordered to move about and exercise.
I am not a rabble-rouser to get the advantage here, but I do have the literacy, which reduces the difficulty of this by, we said, encounter number 4, by 3. So it's a 10. And I can pick up the skill of Repartee. Okay, so confusing orders, and I can get the aid result. On a roll of a 10, down 1 because of the initial encounter I had as an advantage. You can call that the quest pip or the tactics pip in a later version of our freestyle rolls. A 9 on 2 dice. And I got that 9 on 2 dice, and a lot of things happen here.
I was poorly armed and knew a general skirmish could escalate. The soldiers were bored, which made them dangerous, ready to be aggressive. "Did you hear about that Scot couple named Kelly?" They all nodded they had not. "Really? The husband and the wife?" I gestured rhythmically with my open palms. "These two, they went around belly to belly." A few of the guards caught on. The rest would know soon enough. "Well, one day in haste, the two used horse glue as paste instead of petroleum jelly." One laugh started them all laughing. A few more limericks seemed to put them all at ease. Wine was even shared.
And I'm going to take that Swaggering, and I get the ability of Repartee. And for the type of game that I'm going to play online here, that's probably a beautiful thing to have, because I can freestyle flair and add that Repartee into a number of actions that I'm doing. And use it to an advantage. And you can see that was a good, nice little preliminary demonstration of how you improve your character through actual play. A 4. Confuse the opponent commander's ability to issue orders. I taunt him with a repartee. In fact, I probably come in with that horse guard of Gabriel's old uniform, and it might be a higher rank, a captain or a major. And I walk in and I talk to the sergeant of the guards here and tell them, "What are you doing?" the attack, if it's going to come, is obviously going to need naval support. Bring your men to the river. And he says, no, that doesn't make sense. We haven't seen anything. There's been no signals that have been fired. That's don't countermand me, man. Get your men organized or lose your job. You see that snow out there? Do you want to spend your life out there digging in the dirt with snow coming down? And so he's moving off with his men. And that has moved us through the first encounter here of C. Now I look for C and see what the action will bring. I'm trying to find a way to get to 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't really get there from C, but I can move over to D. I can just follow the guards over to the command residence, and but that doesn't seem like it's going to give me. Or I could go back to this courtyard here that I originally avoided, but that doesn't get me the right thing. So how do I get to 1, 2, 3, or 4? I'm going to bypass and come over all the way to A and see what the result is here.
I continued my skulk, this time to the southwest. The castle had needed some proper defenses for an age. It was built to withstand a siege, but now cannons would easily tumble any wall. It had to be retrofitted with ramparts across the entrances. The platform of curtain walls was thickened to support retaliatory cannon. The clear strategy would be for an enemy to shell her with mortars from the river, but the trees were now hindering that. An army would need to practice where the garrison was already sited and elevated. For me, I could use the trees and the small sheds to assemble my plans. In some ways my training helped, but there was much I needed to learn. Instruction at a university would have been such a delight, but I probably would just spend my days whoring instead of studying. Can anyone do both? Of course, but you need money.
Past the guards, who are mostly moving on, the other guys are probably saluting me, and I've moved myself. Do I need a token here? Yes, why don't we add a token here? Tokens are nice. They tend to focus play, and I'm going to try the option of A. And at A, I got the situation where I need a distraction, not too subtle request for help. The locals need the skill of hunter. I don't have the skill of hunter. And so it's basically the guys here in the peasantry, they're probably workers here, and they say they haven't eaten in a little while. Are you a hunter? Can you kill this boar that we've sort of trapped in the pit here? And I was telling them, well, I don't really have the ability to do that easily. It's, seems like messy work and beyond my ability. It's since I don't have the result, it's going to turn out that the rival inside is going to be warned, or the rival outside is going to be warned. So EI's conversation with his brother Adam did not come out, and it turns out that these guys probably hunting the boar were men that were there waiting for me to show up. That does not speak well for EI's conversation with his brother Adam, that they would know that I'm here. They would know I have the uniform.
I was moving further and further south until I saw a few men wave to get my attention. I tried to pretend I was busy or did not understand, but more and more they signaled. When finally one fired a pistol into the air, I had to stop and look. I shouted at them. I was needed elsewhere. One of the men trotted over. He was not the one that fired the pistol. I could tell he was armed. He clenched something under his cloak. I could see his hands flex, and the hammer of the pistol made a distinctive indent outward. The man wanted me to come and look at a boar that was captured. I said nothing. He asked if I was armed or knew where the workers could get a spear. Again, I did not reply. He teethed his lips and made faces of dissatisfaction. He finally said that I could be the one to shoot the thing. Come, he gestured. I recognized the deception. I walked backward away from them, locking eyes on the worker who seemed ever more soldier than farmer. I could tell he wanted to pull his gun, but he had other orders. Part of his speech pattern had the same inflection as EI. But this Russian agent that was in front of me was not friendly. He must have been from Adam, the bastard brother opposed to us. I feared for my patron, but had a mission. The man who confronted me eventually turned and trotted off back to where he came. I did not give them time to decide what they wanted to do with me. I would be gone, full sprint over the hillock, and quick turns left and right to the very edge of the castle walls, where I had stashed my accoutrement. If they were following, I had eluded them for now.
It's going to pass harmlessly for the moment as I move on. Let me see if I can get through with what's happening at H. At H, there's an indirect path over to 4, but it goes through some kennels. And I need to discover this route. Now, do I have the ability Prospector and Sapper to sort of either take the layer of the land or knock down a small barrier or a earthen berm, pile some earth against a wall to get up? I don't. So it would probably turn into a tasking role for me. Now, there's a generic table that's in Cutlass. It's actually in most of the freestyle games. And that generic table, I'm going to make this a difficult roll. I would need a 12 at level 0 in order to do this on my own. If I want to get from H to 4, I need a roll of a 12 to get past this preliminary berm. And I say, why can't we make a ladder? Well, there's no ladders on the outside. What sort of fortress is going to leave its ladders on the outside? Yeah, you make a good point there. And I don't really want to come in through here and use that gate, because that's how they set up murder holes. The fact that you'd have to move through the wall section here and get past this triangular section of the fortress. So I need a 12 on 2 dice in order to dupe my way past the kennels. And sometimes you get lucky.
I could not delay any more. I could see the fires I told my own followers to set had been done and were going out. The appearance of Adam's henchman signaled I needed to get inside. Who would I want to be captured by? Maybe the mayor, since I already escaped him once, but everyone learns with practice. The ramparts were easy to reach. I acted like a surveyor and even found an abandoned tube that looked like it held architectural plans. I walked off paces in one direction then another. I nodded my contentment, all under the watch of the guards on the upper walls. The murder hole I approached was giving them the full advantage. They could shoot me from 2 sides. They did not even need to wait to boil any oil. A few bricks would be easy enough to drop and crack my skull. No soldier outside of the formed battle line wore any metal helmet. As I approached the gate, I was surprised to see it open. Why wouldn't it be? Men were coming and going. My uniform was again playing a part. No one stopped me. I made my way into the fortress interior and followed other men to what looked like the bachelor officer quarters.
Wow, that was a good damn roll. And I'm going to check an ignoble for that. So I've conned my way into the fortress here, and that would probably be a display of skills in Savoir-Faire. Whenever you have a roll that you're making on the task resolution table, it gives you an opportunity to check off display of skills in Savoir-Faire. And this is the only ignoble that can tend to become easier as you advance in level. All the other ones you need to have more difficult and more dangerous situations, more global affecting situations. Now, the ignoble of display of skills in Savoir-Faire, the impact of it may be more significant as I go up in level, but the roll itself as I go up in level becomes easier. Now, some things have to be simple in the game. I'm back to my encounter flow here, and I'm at 4. What's going to happen at 4? The Major's Quarters. So I move up into the Major's Quarter, and I realize this guy is a crippled vet, and he's on his last legs, and I just need to comfort him. But I have a book of the Psalms that's actually written in French. It's not written in Latin? No. It's written in the vernacular. And to hear some of the Psalms read in our language, they have so much more impact. So I take out Johan's version of the translated Psalms, and I start reading them to them, and I see if he's going to be sympathetic and let me pass or not.
I entered the first room I found unlocked. I needed to get out of sight for a bit. The door, it might have opened with a push, but the chamber was hardly unoccupied. I saw a man, but he did not see me, though we were no more than 7 feet apart. He did hear me. He sat in a wheeled chair, cripple. A veteran obviously respected and not abandoned to the streets of the left bank. His uniform was worn, but stitched by attendees with some care. He rotated his chair to face me. I'd yet to say anything. His face was a horror. He was blinded by arquebus flash. His cheeks were pockmarked and speckled with black pepper craters from years of snuggling the butt next to a powder flash pan. Now, the difficulty is here, if he does not think
that I'm sincere or he is a true papist himself, he'll call the guards and it'll escalate. But let's see if I can get past the 4 here and move on. Now, does 4 get me? Position 4 does not get me into the center court. The center court is going to take, let's see, does it take 4? I'm going to need to get to 3 somehow before I can get access to the center courtyard and meet and find the Fabergé egg. So, and again, the reason why I know this is either I generated as a referee ahead of time, or in my case, I cheated and I have programs, because I've been writing programs for Cutlass for 40 years, that can generate action behind the scenes and take some of the thought process away from me. And no, you cannot have copies of this. I know people have asked me, but I just can't give away software that I can't keep the integrity on with all of the dangers of people turning viruses into it, turning on its ear. If you have the ability to write code, most of gaming becomes a lot easier. If you don't have the ability to write code, rejoice in the storytelling of either doing it on the fly, pulling it right out by the seat of your pants, or putting a little effort in ahead of time. Most referees like to do this anyway, and think about your plots and weave your stories well. Here comes my my encounter with the injured vet. And the injured vet, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make that an ordinary roll. All I need is a 7 to read the Psalms to him and calm him down. 2 dice. Made my 9.
Are you the new priest? Instinctively, I just pulled out my pamphlet and started reading a random page. Psalm 9:9-10. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. It seemed to work as I quieted the man. Part of me was not ready to lie about being part of the clergy. God was watching, and some sins are beyond redemption. I had heard on shipboard the soldier's psalm. I quickly found and read it. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. The man nodded and folded his hands in prayer. I reached out and put a hand on his, kneeling down to his level as I did so. I was ready to leave. Why not in Latin? Oh my. I mistakenly forgot I was reading from the French version given to me by Hugo. I was outed. He knew I was no priest, holding monopoly with a language. I exhaled noticeably and spoke a half-truth. I hate the Italians. He smiled. He related how he does as well. Deserted us at the Battle of Pola. I almost left him my copy, but what good would that do? War had left him at humanity's mercy. I had no desire to see him further burned.
So I calmed down him, and I'm going to come over to 3 and see if I can get into the inner sanctum here. It's a great hall. I should be able to just walk through, but the guards here seem stalwart. Now, I could try to use my repartee and just do this as a freestyle action. I could use my cunning to see another way to the courtyard, but probably the best thing to do here would be that eventually I'm going to have to get right back into combat. And another way to determine what you should need in a situation is the fact that you should look at your character sheet. And I need a sea voyage and maritime management. Well, that's not going to happen. I need a mutiny and actions at sea. That's not going to happen. But I need a tailworthy experience. And it's a lot more tailworthy to say that I entered into this thing and I said, I'm challenging you all that you need to get back out there to work, and I'm going to use the cards of, is it gamingly? Yeah, I can't flip gamingly. I'm too low a level. But what I'll do is I'll take a roll again on defensive. Not easy rolls, but they are what they are. And I'm going to take a card on defensive to try to get through the situation that's going to obviously escalate on me. And let me flip a card here. And here comes my card flip on defensive. And it's the star card. Now, the star card is probably going to tell me that I am going to cancel the effect of major tarot currently influence the players in this Q&D. And there's this first flip is Q&D, so it's sort of a wasted card at the moment. I could interpret the star card to get an advantage. Do I still have my +1 for the rest of this encounter? I sure do. Now, would that star card inverted cancel it? Yeah, I think the jig is up. I've gone too far, and I've gone too many hours since the initial uprising. The guys are probably filtering back angry. Hey, there's the guy that told us to look for the sea battle on the coastline, and there was none of that.
My attempt to blend in and enjoy a meal was spoiled by my nearly spent shoes. I should have taken Gabriel's boots. My worn footwear, which I often would discard to climb a mast barefoot, were nearly sandals. The soles were good, but the sides allowed water to soak my socks. I'd given away my impoverished state, and that I was not truly a member of the King's Horse Guards. No spur has ever fit on that heel. No argument there, I was accused. If I was even a smidge of an equestrian, I would have known that, or covered with some other lie about my comfort. Instead, I pulled 2 pistols and was going to take a moment to see how many of them were eager to be the first and second to die. If my left foot could cock and fire, I would have aimed 3. But then again, I would have had to shed my old shoes, and they were comfy.
So here I come with my card, and it's a knight, but it's going to be a Bane. A Knight Bane defensive. Now, what's nice about defensive is that if you're low level against high level opponents, there's no defensive modifier in the defensive modifier. There's no defensive modifier in the defensive action. Wow, that's a tongue twister, isn't it? The opponent nicks my face, giving me a nice dueling scar. Overcome your apprehension that you face a superior swordsman. Well, probably all superior swordsmen to me in swordplay, and I'm not a fencer. And fail and select a regular next round. If the player character's trait lordly, the roll is automatic success. However, pick a second card as a revenge action on brash. Now, it's a 6, advantage fencer. 2 dice for a 6, or I'm taking my actions on a regular. Let's see if I can make 2 dice for a 6. And I made a 7. So the guy goes to flick and make a dueling scar on me, but I've had worse.
A very fine soldier had obviously faced the business end of a barrel. He rose and unsheathed his rapier in one fine motion. With a lunge, he could have slain me. Instead, with a flick, he nicked my face. He seemed content delivering a mere dueling scar. He may have thought I was a spy, a noble, or some dilettante trying to pretend at ruffian. He started to brag about the lesson he was giving me in fencing. Confess your business or intrigue, or my next stab will remove an eye. I dared not shoot and fully disarm myself. One dead man of a group of 30, wouldn't have worked the math. I simply scowled and scraped my 5 o'clock shadow with the gun's muzzle, accentuating the line where my jaw was dislocated and popped back into position just a week ago. EI chose me well. I was not going to betray his trust. I was not going to surrender. Better to be slain than face torment by these men whose whole life they've been taught to be superior. Your blade is like a damsel kissing my cheek. Care to see how rogues handle schoolmarms? I fired both barrels just to be certain the final tally was at least even Stevens.
He probably improved my appearance with the ladies. And here comes the next flip of the game. And the next flip of the game is going to be the lovers.
I had to choose between a dangerous man who looked bored and an eager man out to prove himself to the brethren of his company. Always let sleeping dogs lie. With the first shots I made, I felled the most aggressive of this lot. The rest had probably not really seen combat, and they certainly were not ready. The sounds of the gunshot inside, double powder loads, was enough to shock them. They were cannoneers for the most part, but my discharge was toward them, not away. A pair of smoke rings ejected in the aftermath of the discharge punched across the room. A few of the new conscripts ducked a second time under those distractions. It was pretty clear now who I needed to defeat to escape.
Now, Lovers is a good card. Gives me lots of flexibility. Until the deck reshuffles, selecting player selects 2 cards and chooses which one he wishes to pick. Here comes my Lovers card. I got a king or an ace. I think I'm going to want that ace. Now, the ace is going to be Flamboyant on a 4, where the king is going to be Disarming Blows on a 7. Now, the king doesn't actually get me out of the battle, and it was a bane. So how about if I pick that ace? I attempt no blows, and I simply dodge and parry my way through all these obstacles. I'm going to start flipping over tables and throwing... Oh, this is a time where you're going to throw the chickens, the chickens and the fowl, the goose. I grab a goose off the table and start whacking around with it. Success, and the character escapes the battle, and I head to the inner sanctum where the egg is living. It is only a difficulty of 4 on 2 dice, and I'll pick up Flamboyant moves. 2 dice for an 11, and I pick up Flamboyant moves.
I grabbed a large goose and swung it at one guy as his buddy seemed to reach out in terror that his meal was going to be wasted. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe to see the thing start flying. It was a goose. A cooked one for sure. I would later chuckle at the metaphor. No longer feathered in ability to take flight, the roasted bird splat and landed middle of a man's chest. He seemed peeved I ruined a clean waistcoat.
And that, my friends, is a tale-worthy experience.
I was flipping tables and tossing chairs. I found myself swinging on a chandelier at one point. I raced up a set of stone steps and abruptly turned about. The men following me stopped as I glowered. This whole affair was becoming fun. It was grand to see the charismatic style and flamboyant moves that came so instinctively, or was leaping the consequence of years of being a boy sailor and spry rig monkey. I managed to reload, or maybe take someone else's gun as they attempted to reload. I fired down from the balcony to scuttle the foes below. Most of them had already fallen prone and stayed there. Many were drunk, or too sedate as courtly constables. This was the most intense brawl they had fought. I was only one man, but a few old scores were also being settled, as some of the fallen had wounds I did not recall inflicting on the gathering. I scanned to see the most dangerous man making his exit, something familiar in his stride, reminding me of someone. He walked in less of a skim and more of a trudge, years of marching through snow. I called down a Russian phrase EI had taught me, "Das Vidanya." He turned and saluted. It was a guess, but I was correct. He was a Dom.
Now, this first ignoble here, Sea Voyages, Training, and Maritime Management. We have loosely interpreted the maritime management over time to be not necessarily things that lead to the water, but things that lead to the successful conclusion of any action. Management is the key word there, and everything in the Cutlass world has a maritime flair. So I can perhaps get one more check of an ignoble here by reaching the climax and getting the Fabergé egg.
I stepped through the door and was awed by the colors. I did not know the worth of what I was seeing, but I knew only kings could afford to have such splendor. Every item was jeweled. My God, the temptation to bag them all. But then what? Hunted countrywide? Nowhere to sell such treasures? One impossible item of obvious supreme nature was more than enough. At least I knew who would take the splendid egg off my hands. If not EI, maybe a Dom.
Now, at the Fabergé egg, I realized that it is a guest room, and this is probably where I'll add a little bit more bawdiness to the whole situation. And I'm a dashing man, I'm a cunning man, and I'm also a very ambitious man in some degree. And I think inside the room there will be a lady and she doesn't need to be she probably is a noble maid of the court, and she's inspecting the items that have come.
Wait, I knew her. It was my gal with the ermine, Lady Jade.
And she tells me when I come in that everything seems to be in order, and I say, what is this egg? It was not supposed to be moved. This was supposed to remain in the main palace as something that's to remind the prime ministers and the ministers of the power and the negotiation, that there was a peace and a war because this was here. A mistake has been made. This could cost both of us our privileges. We'll be lucky if we're not horsewhipped. And she starts to cry, and I tell her, well, I should try to make a roll of 7 to see if she's even buying this. 2 dice, and it's a 9. Such a cruel man. But I comfort her. I pull her close to me, and I wipe away her tears, and I say that I think if I can take this egg, I'm going to put it I'll put it in this leather pouch here, and I'll move it back and secretly put it back in its place. And she's very thankful for that. I wipe away her tears, and I say that she's messed up her collar, and that's not going to do here. She's going to need to change her outfit here. And I start to show her that go to her bodice, and I loosen the laces, and I said, you're not going to be able to breathe properly here if you're so tightly corseted. This is the even though it's cold outside with the snow, you need to make sure that you're well dressed for the affairs, and I will make my seduction complete.
We were both naked and settled into a fine rut. She seemed pleased by my technique, and I decided to show her my full education of growing up in a bawdy house. I would later read a copy of the Karma Sutra on my travels to Indus. Must say I was not impressed. Those fine Marseille ladies, the exhibitionists of my youth, could fill another 1,000 pages of positions, and that would not even cover the stimulation of their role-playing. What those gals could pretend to be, actors would certainly shout bravo, and had. As I conducted my next cartwheel, or whatever grapple it was named, I wondered if Jade had detected my disguise on our first meeting, extricating her coach from the snow, or on the later encounter as she exited for the hotel. She seemed more wise than the naive she's pretending to be. Her initial tears seemed forced. Did I catch her in the act of stealing? She did not seem a typical thief. Her pantomime was not convincing to a cunning man. I'd seen my mother's business associates con the last coin from a visiting journeyman, relating tales of sweethearted sisters kept out of the cruel life, or the redemption that a few coins for a coach might bring to a fallen girl off to a nunnery, pay for the Xmas feast, a father's cane, or mother's poultice. Lady Jade stopped abruptly. Well, not so abruptly, as more just signaling her need to do other things this day. She related how she was to be engaged to a man she had never met. She asked me if I ever had dealings with the Lord High Mayor of Paris. Do you know him? I smiled and said I did. He seems like a man who treats all men and ladies equally, an egalitarian of one temperament. I said my goodbye and headed out the window to the trellis I located earlier. When I glanced back, she was already dressed. So she knows how to pivot. She will do well in court, but whose king truly held her fealty? Why should I care? I was still alive and having a grand time.
I think the lady is well charmed. I think my libido is well satisfied, and at that moment, we're going to call it a day and call it a completed mission here. And I'll come back into the epilogue where I'll deliver the egg back to EI if he has not been brutally, if he even remembers that he was after it, the foolhardy man that he is. And I will walk away with, at this moment, a successful mission and my final check of management for getting that egg away from the palace here. More later.